Shabbat Shalom. I want to tell you a love story. In the late 1970s, San Diego, a young man named Dan decided to make Aliyah. He was actually going to do it a lot earlier, but his mother wouldn't let them. So he finally got his mother's permission after he graduated college to hop on his Aliyah flight and start a new life in Israel. He gets off the plane, and he waits to catch a bus to Hebrew University. He's going to go to grad school. And as he's waiting with other future university students from the same flight, he strikes up a conversation with a cute 17-year-old girl from New York named Elise, who was also off to Hebrew University to start undergrad. She was dragged by her rather large family when they all made Aliyah together. Unlike Dan, Elise was a little less enthusiastic about the prospect, but I think she maybe felt a little bit better when she saw how cute the boys were. And anyway, that's the story of how my mom met my dad. Oh. That's not the love story I wanted to tell you, though. I'm telling you that so that you understand, like so many of you, Israel has always been a part of my own story, even before I set foot in the country itself. Like Asaf Gleich told his story a couple weeks ago, I only exist because of Israel. How else does a boy from Chicago, by way of San Diego, meet a girl from New York? I have literally always felt a kinship, a connection to the land of Israel. And so every triumph and tragedy there is deeply personal to me. My parents met and lived there. My great-grandmother, my grandparents, my uncles, my aunts all made Aliyah. They also made Yerida. They all came back. It's another story. But even beyond them, in my extended family on both sides, have been in Israel since before 1948. My dad's side, specifically, live in Nahariya. It's a city on the northernmost coast. They got there in the 1930s, buying the land directly from its Arab owners. Not sure who was colonizing anything at that point. Years later, my parents would escape the hustle and bustle of Jerusalem life to spend Shabbat in beautiful Nahariya. It's like a resort town. It's gorgeous up there. And they would be with family, my dad's cousin, her husband, and especially their new little baby boy, who they named Ehud. Everyone called him Udi for short. My parents would love to bring him toys from Jerusalem, all the good stores, you know. My dad remembers that Udi was a cute kid, very friendly. He made those visits up north in the 1970s when they lived there even more lively and warm. Udi was a child who was, my dad says, truly a delight. Fast forward to July of 2008. It's the first time I'm ever in Israel, ever. And in Nahariya, no less. And that's where I was when Udi's body was returned in a prisoner exchange with Hezbollah. His Humvee was patrolling 2 years prior. When Hezbollah came into Israel, attacked the patrol, they took Udi, whose full name is Ehud Goldwasser, and a man named Eldad Regev over the border into Lebanon. It was the start of the Lebanon War. In the lead up to the prisoner exchange, there was a certain buzz in the country. I remember at the time being very confused by it. Mind you, I was only about 19 years old, so I was wise in many ways, but less so in others. I was confused because, to me, the pessimistic teen that I was, it was obvious what would happen to him, an active duty soldier, not a civilian, taken by Hezbollah. And I was confused with just the tone of the country. Everyone knew that they were coming back. Everyone knew that the deal had been struck. But there was this big question mark for when they would lift the canvas from the back of the truck. Everyone knew they would be in there, but there was a question still, apparently, of in what state. You could sense the anticipation building all day as everyone watched, myself included, live on TV as the truck crossed over. And the country collectively held its breath as the canvas on the back of the truck was flipped open to reveal 2 wooden boxes. And you felt the country collectively cry out in anguish because to the very last second they had hope. Hope that Udi and Eldad would appear, emaciated, perhaps sickly, but alive. And that hope confused me. I've never told this story before for 2 reasons. One, because unlike most of my stories, it's not only mine to tell. It's about real people, so no pseudonyms and no changing identifying information. And I didn't want anyone thinking that I'm trying to curry pity by extension. And 2, because I've never been able to make sense of that experience. How could Israelis, who had lived through more wars than I ever will, still have thought there was a glimmer of hope for a captured Israeli soldier? That it would end any other way? But now, 15 years later, I get it. I get it. Finally, I get it. Israelis know, because Judaism relentlessly holds it to be true, that in the deepest, darkest part of night, when you struggle to see in all that inky blackness, you have no choice but to guard, like a precious treasure, that one single small spark, that flame of hope. We must never, ever lose our hope. We must never succumb to despair. Don't take this cheaply. This is hard-won Jewish knowledge. At every Pesach Seder we say, in every generation they have risen up to destroy us, and then we list the varying ways over thousands of years that many, many, many people have tried to extinguish us. Our hope is not the hope of the self-deluded. It is because we have endured so much, lived through such trials, survived every attempt at destruction, that we know that we cannot ever despair. We cannot lose hope that Am Yisrael Chai, the people Israel, live. This is so much harder to do than to say. When we see the hundreds of empty seats at Shabbat tables that are installed publicly all around the globe from Tel Aviv to Times Square to remind the world that over 200 of our brothers and sisters are being held hostage by Hamas for nearly a month. When you see those long empty tables with full-size chairs and high chairs too, to remind the world that it cannot look away, try as it might, from the fact that children as young as 9 months old are being held hostage, a violation of every law of war, every rule of engagement that every other country is held to. When I think of the hostages, and the fear, and what they are enduring right now, it's hard not to feel despair. When we are screaming at the world to not look away from their faces when they rip down the posters that have them, to not look away from our pain, our collective agony, as more and more new details emerge, as remains are investigated and identified in Israel, the depths of the depravity, the barbarity with which Hamas terrorists treated civilians, babies, toddlers, children, parents, old people, disabled people, mostly Jewish, though not all, the details of which I won't go into because there are children here. And we Jews, at least, hold sacred the innocence and purity of childhood. But I also don't need to detail the horrors that have been made public, because you already know. You see the same news I do, you scroll the same social media I do. Every new horrific detail about Hamas attack that left 1,400 dead, there aren't enough grave diggers in Israel to keep up. Every new detail I learn leaves me breathless, leaves all of us without air, with a deep, deep sadness for the victim, shock at the depravity with which one human being can treat another, and rage just at everything. In those moments, hope feels very far away. And when the war between Israel and Hamas over there seems to be multi-front, and that it's between Israel and the Hamas terrorists, and between anti-Semites and Jews all around the globe, both those we have long known about, those anti-Semites we are all familiar with, but also those who claim to fight for human rights, just not all humans, apparently. It feels sometimes like we're screaming into the world to see us, to recognize our humanity, our right to live at the very least, like everyone else. And that seems like it's asking too much from some people. When you feel so very alone, and indeed are under attack, it is very hard to feel any hope. But Proverbs teaches, Tochelet memushacha Lev. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. We literally cannot live without hope. And how do we hope? With what do we pin our hope? I told you. The very first sentence of this devar. A love story. We must love first ourselves. We must love ourselves more than the anti-Semites hate us, and that's a lot. We must love ourselves. We must fall in love with being Jewish, to feel proud to be of a people who have outlived every single one of our tormentors throughout our history. The Canaanites, the Babylonians, don't see those around. Ancient Egyptians, ancient Greeks, ancient Romans, well, they're gone. Spanish Inquisition, the Nazi Party, they're all gone, but not us. Because Am Yisrael Chai, the people Israel, live. When we love ourselves, that flame flickers to life. We must love each other. I see Jewish communities, all denominations, all countries, packing and sending supplies to Israel, to the displaced, to the soldiers, sending money in this economy. We are a people who truly coalesce like none other. In Israel, regular city folks are volunteering to go to farms, the kibbutzim, to harvest the produce because so many workers have fled or been displaced. The Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, traditionally refused military service, are volunteering for the military. Lines to donate blood go on for kilometers. When we see the love and the love story of the Jewish people, that flame grows stronger. And then we're able to take that flame of love and we're able to project it outward. So when we look out at the world, it becomes easier to see and hear above the din over those who would blame us for our own tragedies and the deafening silence of others. When we have that much love that we can look out, it makes it easier to see that there are those who are brave enough to stand up and to declare that children and old people, civilians, cannot be hostages and must be freed at once, period. That there is never, ever an excuse for the premeditated, deliberate attack of civilians. And that, in fact, Jews are human beings too and deserve the same right to live as every people on earth. It's easier to hear those voices when your heart is softened, at least a little bit, with love. Many allies, governments around the world have declared their support of Israel and their own Jewish citizens. And every time I hear it, it heartens me. Other religious communities stand with us as well. Did you know the Hindus of Greater Houston Society attended our Israel rally that first week? Yeah. So moved were they that they donated $10,000 to the Federation's Emergency Israel campaign. We may feel alone. Yeah, thank you for the Hindus. We may feel alone when all we hear is hate because it is so very loud. But we are not alone, and the flame of hope grows even more within when we recognize that. And love is the secret weapon, loving ourselves, the Jewish people, and all who care, keeping that hope alive that one day things will be better, because as bad as they are now, there is good stuff too. We must make room in our lives for love and joy and celebration alongside our sadness, smashing the glass under the chuppah. We cannot let those who hate us take away our joy. Hope is a reminder that as bad as it may be now, and as bad as it will be later, it will not always be so. We Jews have the long view of human history. Things will be better, even if they're not right now. That is why I now understand the optimism of the Israelis. They had hope because they couldn't not have hope. They had hope because they could not have hope that Am Yisrael Chai, the people Israel, live. We must never stop hoping, because to stop hoping will break our hearts. So we must always hope, and we must always fortify ourselves with love. Love for our Judaism, our Jewish people, and all those who celebrate all of humanity. My dad's cousin, my cousin, Ehud Goldwasser, did not come back alive. But I must believe. Ani ma'amina be'emunah shlema. I believe with perfect faith that all those who are held hostage will soon spend Shabbat in their own homes. And what's more, that we cannot relinquish the dream of the prophet Micah. They will turn their weapons of war into farming tools. Lo yisa goy al goy cherev. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation. V'shavu ish tachat gafni. And every family will sit under their own vine and fig tree, and there will be none to make them afraid. And let us all say, Amen. Shabbat shalom.